We are at the Audioholics Smart House, boots on the ground, in the reference theater room. I want to talk to you guys about this system and about the challenges I had to overcome to make it a truly reference state-of-the-art home theater experience. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasala with Audioholics. I want to give you guys a tour of my home theater system in here, and I want to talk about the issues that I had to overcome to make this a truly state-of-the-art system. The first thing I want to show you is when you come in here, you see that I have double doors, and there's a big gap here. It's about an 8-inch gap, and you're wondering, that's kind of a waste of space. The reality is it's not a waste of space. I wanted to do the best I could to sound isolate this room from the rest of the house. Now granted, I used a builder that was semi-custom builder. They wouldn't let me do certain things to make this truly a decoupled room, but they allowed me to at least do a double door. These are solid core doors with an 8-inch gap, and I have gaskets all around the door. So in order to really benefit from a solid core door, you need to have everything fully sealed. If you could see light going through the door, then that means sound is also going through the door. The other important thing are the door sweeps. I use a company called Kinetics, and these are pressurized door sweeps. As you close the door, the gasket locks in and it pushes down into the ground. They aren't cheap. They're about $400 or $500 per, but they really do make a difference. So one of the challenges with this door system was the fact that this house was being built during COVID and I wasn't able to check on everything. So the builder kind of screwed me over a little bit. I wanted exterior garage doors that are 1 3/4 inches. What they did instead was they put a solid core door, but they're only 1.5 inches. It made it very challenging to get those door sweeps in. I had to actually shimmy them in and it kind of cracked the door a little bit. And also there's a little less sound isolation because it's 1.5 inches instead of 1 3/4 inches. You really want at least 1 3/4 inches on your doors. The other thing is, this is only 30 inches wide. It's a problem when you're bringing in furniture. It's a problem when you're bringing in big audio gear. I've scraped my knuckles up many times. So always check with the builder. I like to have at least a 32-inch door. But with this door system and with both doors shut, it really makes a huge difference in sound isolation. In fact, I might do a separate video on that with some measurements if there's some interest. Give me some comments down below on that. So let's go into the theater room. The first stop is the riser platform. I wanted to have 2 rows of seats in this room, because I want to have the ability not only to entertain myself and my family, but when I have guests over. And the idea behind the riser platform is I wanted the second row to be taller than the first row. That way you're not blocking your line of sight. You can still see the screen. But I also wanted to make this riser platform functional. And what I mean by functional is it's built with layered HDF and it's on 2x8s and there's space between them. And in between each cavity, I have it filled with fiberglass, about 75% filled. And then I have it tuned towards the back of the riser in the maximum pressure area. And what that does is it acts a little bit like a bass trap, but it gives me a tactile feel in this row. So when the really low frequencies hit, I believe the tuning frequency of this platform is around 25 hertz. So when you get some LFE action going, the entire platform shakes. I don't need bass shakers. I hear people ask me all the time, do you have bass shakers? There's no need. I've got 5 subwoofers in here. I've got this platform. If you're sitting towards the back of the room, you're in a maximum pressure area anyway, so the bass is going to be elevated naturally. It's a surreal experience. It's a visceral experience when you sit here, and it's a really enjoyable one. Now, the one thing I do wish, this is a pretty big room. It's 25 feet by 20 with a 10-foot ceiling. I always tell you guys, you don't want your seats any closer to the back wall more than a quarter length of the room. So I really wanted to have a 5 or 6 foot offset from the back wall. I couldn't do that without taking up too much of this room. These seats are about 3 feet from the back wall, and what that does is it gives me a bass buildup in the 25 to 30 hertz range compared to the front row. It's not something I mind for movies. It's actually welcomed. A lot of people that are bass heads will want to sit here and enjoy that. But if you want precise bass sound, I really prefer the front row. It's much more linear. There's much less elevated, really low frequencies. So there's a variance of about 4 or 5 dB between the front row to the back row. It's not a big deal, but I'm very meticulous about getting good bass response. So the platform works really well. It's lit at night, so you don't have to trip on it. There's a step here. It's really important to have a step. This is about 11 inches high, so without having that step, people would jump off and get a leg injury or a knee injury or ankle injury. You don't want any of that. You always want to make sure you have a way to exit, and you want to have the lighting on it. So even when it's dark in here, you could still see that. So moving on to the front row, another challenge I had here was I wanted to have less seats in the front row and more seats in the back row. It just didn't work out that way because these are Valencia Tuscany seats. They're really large seats, and I could not fit 4 seats on the back platform. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to use the door. So I put 4 seats, and what I did was I offset these seats. So the money seat is right here. The seat that is equidistant from my main speakers is the second seat, and it looks like it's offset when you come in the room, but it's 100% equidistant from the left and the right wall. And it's really important, especially if you're a music person, to have symmetry, not only sidewall symmetry, but you want to be equidistant of your main listening position relative to your front speakers. I'm all about getting 2-channel as a priority in every theater system I design. I want to have a good music experience and then build upon that. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about are room acoustics. No matter how good of gear you buy, how much you spend on speakers, electronics, your cables, all of that is to naught if you don't have a good foundation in your room. If you don't have control of your room acoustics, you're not going to have a great listening experience. You heard how my voice sounded when I was outside of this theater room. You heard how it was reverberant and echoey. Listen to how my voice is so natural in here now. With the help of Anthony Grimani, with Sonitus, with his products, I got this room sounding really well balanced, but it wasn't without its challenges. So I did my best to do symmetry on the sidewalls. I did a combination of absorption, reflection, and diffusion, but I didn't go overboard. The rule of thumb is you want to have about 25% of each, but I try to leave some bare walls as much as possible. Obviously, I couldn't put all of my treatments on the sidewalls towards the back of the room because one side of my room has a window, the other side doesn't. Now, the builder was originally making this room without a window, and I thought to myself, I don't want someone to read my obituary one day saying, "Here lies Gene Della Sala, president of Audioholics, died in his own theater room from a fire because he couldn't escape." You always want to have an exit strategy, not just the one door. So I made sure I had a full-size window here, which I put drapes over, and I covered it so you don't see any light coming in. But those are the kind of compromises that won't allow you to perfectly place all of your acoustic treatments. And I see people on the forum saying, oh, you got to calculate your angle and put your absorption here, put your first reflection there. You can't always do that. It's not an exact science, and there's always compromises you have to make in a room. The idea is you want to have the right proportions of absorption, reflection, and diffusion. And that's what I try to do here. So starting with the sidewalls, you can see the combinations of these treatments that I put from Sonitus. Then we go into the corners, and I wanted to put some bass trapping in here because I wanted to give my multi-sub a fighting chance. This is a room that unfortunately has exterior wall concrete and a very hard floor. So what that means is the standing waves are going to be built up even higher because these are very rigid walls. In my last house, it was on a second floor, and I had all wood construction frame sidewalls and a suspended floor that was wood. There were advantages to that. There were advantages in the fact that there was more tactile energy that you felt through the floor from the base, and then the walls would breathe more, so the standing waves weren't built up as much. But in this case, we've got exterior wall, partition wall, exterior wall. So the standing waves get pretty excessive. And to overcome some of that, I put some bass trapping. You can see from floor to ceiling, I got Sonitus bass trapping, the corner traps. These are great products. If you guys haven't checked these out, I do recommend that you check them out. If you could put a column like this in every corner of your room, you're doing yourself favors. The next thing I'll talk to you about is what I did behind the speakers. So because these speakers are about 3.5 feet off the front wall, I have an acoustic problem called speaker boundary interference response. And there's a dip between 80 to 100 hertz. I just did a video on that, and I'll link it in the video description down below. Because this is a full range tower, I did not bass manage it. This is flat down to 18 hertz. And that dip from 80 to 100 hertz is problematic. One way of fixing this was I used an all-pass filter on one of the bass columns. And I'll talk a little bit about more of that when we talk about the electronics in this room. The other way to fix it was I try to put some acoustic treatments behind them. Now these are GIC acoustics, they're about 4-inch panels. They're not quite effective in the 80 hertz range to solve that problem. If you really want to do it passively, you need very thick panels. You need 7 or 8-inch panels with a couple of inch offset from the front wall. It's not always practical. So a way to fix this is to put subs behind the speakers which I obviously don't have space. So I did my best to put subs around the room to help overcome that, and I raised my crossover frequency to about 85 hertz. And now that dip, which was massive before, is only about 3 or 4 dB, and it's very tolerable, and it's only in a few seats. My back row doesn't have that problem. So I've solved this problem using acoustics, using multi-sub, using DSP, and positioning of my seats, and I've got a really good bass response in here. Moving on to the screen is another area where people forget that you could actually acoustically treat your screen if you use an acoustically transparent screen. This screen is awesome. This is a company called Severtson. It's an acoustically transparent screen. It's a 16:9, 150-inch wide screen. And what I did behind the screen was I put absorption behind it. It's a free way to get room treatments in here without seeing it. And you don't have to use fancy stuff. I actually, at the time that I built this room, there was a supply chain issue. I couldn't get Owens Corning fiberglass in black. So I went to Walmart and I got that really thick memory foam and I stapled it onto the wall. It's not pretty. You could see it in the pictures. It's not the greatest looking thing, but you don't see it because the screen is covering it. And the beauty of this now is I have my center channel within line of sight of the listening area, and the tweeter level is all matched with my left and right. I've got basically 3 identical speakers for left, center, right, and behind the screen like this is a huge advantage when you can match your LCRs, because now the transition from panning to left, center, right is very natural. I have a vertically oriented center channel, so there's no lobing, off-axis lobing problems if you're sitting really far axis, like onto the far left or far right seat. And the blend is just perfect. So when you hear dialogue now, it's coming from the screen. It's not coming from below the screen. So sometimes when you don't have an acoustically transparent screen, you're gonna have to put the speaker either below the screen or above the screen, and then the panning is not as natural. So that's really important. And what I noticed when I put the treatments, the acoustic treatments behind the screen, is it just tightened up the image. It just sounded, everything sounded more real to me, more intimate. So when I listen to music, I get a really strong phantom center. It's those 2 main speakers that are imaging so well because I've got good acoustic control in the room. I've got good sidewall symmetry in the room. I have these speakers matched acoustically and electrically, and the amplitude response and the phase response because they have FIR correction in them. I can't overemphasize the importance of good room acoustics. So moving on in the room acoustics area, I want to talk to you about the ceiling. The ceiling didn't come out quite like I wanted to plan. At the time, with the supply chain issues, I wanted to have 2x4 panels suspended from the ceiling, but I couldn't get them in black. They were only in white availability. So I took some of the panels that Grimani sent me from Sonitus and I stuck them onto the ceiling. I did about as much as I could because I have a lot of ceiling acne. I've got air conditioned vents, I've got speakers, I got a ceiling fan, I've got can lights. I couldn't do everything I wanted to on the ceiling, but I compensated for some of that by using a very thick throw rug with a pad under it. And believe it or not, these bean bags, I put them here as a placeholder for my kids because when they have sleepovers, they like using these. These actually work acoustically very well. I've measured the response in this room with and without them. I'm keeping them here. Yeah, they're not the prettiest thing, but everybody gravitates towards coming in here and kind of laying on them. And acoustically, they're beneficial. The other thing that's beneficial with acoustics is your seats. So when you put mass in a room, in this case I've got 7 chairs, that makes a difference. It loads the room with absorption and it helps quiet the RT60 decay time. And if you look at the RT60 decay time of this room, it's right around where I was targeting. I wanted about 350 to 400 milliseconds. I don't like an RT60 decay that's too high or too low. If you're primarily listening just for music, then it's better to have a higher RT60 decay time because you're not relying on multiple speakers giving you sound from different locations. But if you're doing home theater and you've got a multi-channel system, then you can make the room a little more dead because now you're getting sound cues from speakers all around you. In this case, I found the right balance. And if you look at the RT60 decay time in this room, it's very linear from 100 hertz out to 10 kilohertz. That's what you want. You don't want it to jump up at certain frequencies or go down. In my last theater room, which I had treated by Audioholics, I'm talking about like in 2005, 2006, they put a lot of 1 and 2 inch fuzz all around the room. And what that did was it acted like a low pass filter and it killed all the high frequency response in the room. And when you walked in the room, it sounded too dead, sounded lifeless. It didn't sound natural. You couldn't have a normal conversation. You should be able to have a normal conversation in a room. And I had to do countermeasures after that fact. I had to change my floor substrate and all that and make the room a little bit more lively. I learned from that. And in this room, I really think I found a great balance in the acoustics. And on the back wall, I experimented between absorption and diffusion and a hybrid of diffusion and absorption. And what I found with the back wall, and in this case, I'm using real traps from Ethan Weiner. What I found is if you're too close to an acoustic panel from a wall, and if it's diffusion, it gets a very phasey kind of sound. I prefer absorption. And what I did with these panels from Ethan Weiner was I have an offset that's about 3 inches off the wall with the brackets that he sent me. And then these panels are 4 or 5 inches thick. So they're very good down to 100 hertz or so. And it covers a large area. They're 2 foot by 4 foot panels. I've got 2 of them right between my back channel speakers, and it makes the world of difference. You really want to do absorption behind you if you can. If you're sitting far away enough, you could do a combination of absorption and diffusion. I'm happy with the way that turned out. The only thing I would like to eventually add in the corner would be more of those bass traps if I could find them or if I could fit them. That would be a nice thing to add there as well. And then above you in the ceiling, above the listening area, I put diffusion. It's a good idea above your listening area to have some diffusion to make the space sound larger. And these are 3D diffusion panels from Sonitus. And then decoratively speaking, I put some diffusion wood panels on my doors. Maybe not the most effective, but cosmetically they look nice. And overall, the acoustic treatments in this room are very well balanced. So moving on, let's talk about the speakers. This is the RBH SVTRS active speaker. I've done reviews on it. I've done videos on it. It's a very special speaker. It's got 4 12-inch drivers for bass. They're a modular design, 3/8 for the mids, and then this Orancantus very large AMT tweeter. This has a lot of dynamic range. This speaker is capable of clean 120 dB SPL output. There's no crossovers in the speaker. This is a fully active speaker. So I have 3 sets of cables coming in here, and I've got DSP processing and amplification, and all of that's done in the digital domain. What it allows me to do is it allows me to tune this speaker to the room exactly how I want it to sound. So if I want more bass, I could do that in the processing. If I want more mid-range or treble, I can make the speaker sound pretty much like anything I want. But most importantly, because there's no crossovers in the path, there's no losses. I just have straight cable, and I'm using a Belden 13-13-8. It's a high strand count 10 gauge cable, and it's over 50 feet long from the speaker over to my amps. But because there's no crossovers and it's low resistance and it's low inductance, there's less than 0.1 dB loss at 20 kilohertz at 4 ohms. So the insertion loss is extremely low, completely nullified by DSP, and it allows me to put my electronics in my media closet, and it makes it a very clean install. Now, if you don't like seeing these large speakers in the room, I like it. But if you don't like it, they have in-wall versions of the speaker system, and you could build a false wall and put all your speakers behind that wall, and it'll be flush mount. Doing that has some advantages. You won't have SBIR issues to deal with because now you're in an infinite baffle. But subjectively, I feel like speakers image better when they're out in the room. I feel the depth of the soundstage more in a system like this than when it's all in-wall. But if your emphasis isn't on music like it is mine, I would suggest you go with all flush mount or put all the speakers behind your screen, get a larger screen if you want. There's options there. I'm happy with the way this is. Now, the thing I wish, these speakers are gloss. Don't get gloss speakers if you're doing a theater room because you can see reflections off these speakers if you're sitting off axis. So if I sit in a far left or far right seat, I can see the movie projecting onto the side walls of the speakers. That kind of annoys me. Not much I could do about that now. Nobody really complains, but it's something that I notice, and it's something I wanted to bring to your attention. Go with a flat black or a matte finish if you can, if you're doing a theater room like this. So let's talk about the ceiling speakers. I originally put 4 Atmos speakers, and I had a placeholder for an extra 2 speakers. And what I did was I put 2 more speakers, and instead of configuring them for Atmos, they're a little bit wider apart. They're angled baffled speakers from RBH. They're the 8-inch versions. I use them as wide channels, and I know I'll get criticism from people on the line that have never actually tried this or heard this. I put them as wide channels. I actually had the guy that mixed the first Transformers movie from 2007 here to do a demo. We listened to Transformers, and I asked him, I go, what did you think about these as wides? He absolutely loved them. It sounds great. So I left it like that. I left it configured like that. I did pre-wire. I pre-wired for wide channels on the sidewalls. But my argument there was I didn't want to make this room too cluttered. If I was going to put more speakers on the sidewalls, then I was worried about getting reflections from my main speakers hitting those cabinets. My focus here was to have the best 2-channel experience. And out of all the systems in my entire house, this is still the reference room for 2-channel, even though it's a home theater. You can have the best 2-channel and home theater in one space. So I left them as wide channels. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I've got 4 speakers in the ceiling that are firing down for Atmos, you know, 25, 30 degrees from the front row, 25, 30 degrees from the back row. Is it perfect? No, but it's really damn good. If I was to do this again, I'd probably put an array of speakers in the ceiling to get a little bit more coverage. But overall, I'm happy with the immersive bubble that this creates. Now, the side channels were a challenge. When I was building this house, I instructed the builder to give me 2x4s over the concrete and build the walls over it. That way I could put flush mount speakers, because I'm a big proponent of getting those side and back channels as far away from the listening area as you can so you don't localize them. Well, they took the 2x4s and they turned them sideways. I've never seen that before. Completely ridiculous. That didn't allow me to put any speakers in the walls at this point. They basically allowed me to put some insulation, which I did. So RBH has an on-wall speaker, and it has the same driver complement as my main speakers with one less mid-range. And that's what I did. I put these on the wall, and they're only about 4, maybe 5 inches deep. So they're pretty low profile. So it keeps them pretty far away from the listening area, which helps to make them not so localized. And I offset them so they're about a foot above seated ear level position than where the tweeter level is, because I didn't want that blazing right at the listener. And then for the back channels, I used a 6.5 inch version. So it's the same thing, it's an MTM. They're in wall because this is our partition wall. This wall, like I was telling you before, it's built with staggered stud construction. It has loosely filled fiberglass and it has mass loaded vinyl. So there's 3 layers here to make this wall as acoustically isolated from the rest of the house as humanly possible that the builder would allow me to do. And those speakers have back box enclosures that were installed during construction that minimizes the sound transfer into other rooms, and it provides an acoustically controlled space for those speakers so they perform as best as they can. So what you're looking at in this system is basically a 9.5.4 system. I've got 9 bed layers, even though my wide channels are in the ceiling on angled baffles. I've got 5 subwoofers, because the main speakers are actually subwoofers that have bass and LFE going to those. And then I've got 4 Atmos channels for 2 rows of coverage. Let's talk about the electronics. So starting from the top, I've got some of my network gear. I've got Luxel. I've got wireless access points from Luxel. I've got a whole network upstairs that controls the whole house. It's all Luxel. I'm really happy with the quality of it. This is like enterprise grade quality stuff. I've got some Furman conditioners here. This is a transformer isolated one. I blacked everything out because all that light was hitting the screen, and that's another thing I kind of regret by putting this rack like this facing the screen. Anything that emits light is becoming light pollution that hits the screen and it crushes your black level. So I try to black everything out as best as possible. Got Kaleidoscape. I've got the media server and the extra hard drive. Awesome system. I've got an old vintage Xbox 360 here. I use it every now and then if my kids want to play Halo or whatever. And I've got 2 RBH amplifiers. One of them powers my 21-inch sub. The other one powered a floor sub, which I actually recently changed out. Another Furman. I got my Oppo UDP 205. I'll take this to the grave with me. They don't make them anymore like this. It's an incredible player. It does everything you would ever want a UHD player to do, including SACD. I've got the 24-channel Storm Mark II, and below that I've got a Marani DSP. This is a commercial grade DAC. It has FIR correction. It does the all-pass filter stuff. It's so much that this thing does, and the DAC on this is superb. This DAC mogs the DAC that's in the Storm, so my 3 front channels are fully active, and I'm benefiting from this incredible DAC that's in here. And then below that, I've got the unrivaled RBH sound amplifier. This powers the front 3 speakers. It's an 8-channel amp. You get 1,500 watts for the subs, 500 watts for the mids, 250 watts for the tweeter, and that's per channel. Below that, I got the 16-channel amplifier from Storm, 200 watts by 16. These both use the Pascal modules. This is just a higher power version of it. So yeah, the real magic of the system is the FIR correction that the Marani does, and the fact that I got these speakers tuned and dialed in so well. In fact, I've had people over and just jaw-dropping reaction just to listen to the music. They always tell me, I can't believe how good your center channel sounds or how good the surround sound is in this room. And I'm like, you're only listening to 2 speakers. Their jaw drops when I tell them that. They don't believe me. Some people have to actually get up and put their ear next to the screen to make sure I'm not lying. That's how convincing it is. So that's a nutshell on that. Let's talk about the bass. So we talked about the fact that these front speakers have 4 12s in each speaker. I've got dual 12-inch subwoofer here. So one driver fires down at the bottom and the other driver fires forward. This is RBH sound. And then I've got another floor sub on that side of the room over there. Now, initially I put a sub that had 2 firing 12s down on the riser platform behind the couch over there. And the tactile was so overdone that I regretted it, and I switched to another sub like this where only one driver is facing the floor and the other one's firing out, so that brought the levels down overall about 3 dB, and it sounds more natural to me. And to finish off this system, I needed an infrasonic sub. That's where RBH's 21-inch sub comes in. You've seen my video on this. This subwoofer is an absolute beast. It weighs almost 400 pounds. It has a 21-inch custom driver for RBH with a 38mm X-Max. It'll handle over 2,000 watts of power easily. This driver is serious business, and it gives me single-digit bass extension in this room because it's a sealed box. So when you have a driver with a really long X-Max in a large box, with a 2400 watt amp, you can get really good deep infrasonic bass because you're benefiting from room gain from a sealed sub, which is only a second order roll off instead of a fourth order like you get with ported subs. So that rounds out the bass of this room. Some of the things I regret in here was putting this rack, putting this closet here created a lot of acoustic problems that I had to overcome. I needed a place to put all my equipment, I needed storage, but by doing this, it didn't allow me to put a sub in each corner. So I had to put the sub here, I had to put the other sub there because there's a door, I couldn't put that in the corner. So these subs are not optimally placed as well as they could be. I had to use a lot of DSP trickery to get the best bass response I could and to get the best seat-to-seat consistency for both rows of seats. That way EQ was more effective. I messed around with Dirac Art, and I had mixed results with it. I've been working with them for over a year. I found problems with the fact that I'm running full range towers, and unfortunately Dirac Art puts a high pass on your main speakers. Even if you set them full range and you slide the slider all the way down, it always puts the high pass in there. I'm trying to get them to remove that because what I noticed when that was implemented is it creates a phase anomaly between my main speakers and the rest of the subs, and I lose bass extension in right below the tuning frequency of my main speakers. So that's a challenge I hope to overcome because I want to benefit from Dirac Art. I know Teo Nikolakis has had excellent results with his system with Dirac Art, but he's also not running speakers up at front that play flat down to 18 hertz. So that's a challenge there with room correction. What I did here was I manually corrected this room. I did old-fashioned PEQ. I did old-fashioned measurements from seat to seat. I tuned the system to ear. I used shelving filters for high frequency stuff, and I used very precise PEQ filters after doing a collection of measurements across all the seats to make sure I dialed in all my subs. I made sure my delays were properly set. I got good integration between my main speakers, my center channel, and all the subs playing in this room. So when you sit in the money seat or you sit in any seat in this theater room, the bass is very consistent. Again, the bass is a little more elevated in the back row, but it's still consistent, and you can't localize where it's coming from. So you sit here and you hear the bass hitting you in the chest. You don't know there's a sub 5 or 6 feet away. If you're sitting over here in the center row, you don't know there's a sub right here. Yes, if you sit on this chair because you're pretty close to the sub, you're going to detect some of the pressure waves. These are the mother-in-law seats. The ones that are at the far off axis, I put the mother-in-law there. Sorry, Mom. So next up, I want to talk about the power in this room. And I had a lot of challenges because the builder hired pretty shoddy electricians. I set up a bunch of dedicated outlets in here. My rack has 3 dedicated 20 amp 120 volt outlets. The floor outlets are 1 dedicated in parallel, and my projector has its own dedicated outlet. The problem I had was I was getting a lot of ground loops in here, and no matter what I did, I had electricians come out. They really couldn't, nobody could figure out why I was getting so many ground loops in here. But what happened when they built this house, again during COVID, I wasn't here, was the main panel was on this side of the house, the left side of the house. And then the sub panels in the garage were on the opposite side. So they had to run a giant ass cable that's like, it's a 0 gauge cable. They ran it from one side of the house all the way over. And I don't know what they did with the grounding or whatever, but I measured a little bit leakage through some of these outlets, and it was creating ground loops depending on if I had some subwoofers that had a 3-prong versus a 2-prong outlet. So I had to use cheater plugs. I wasn't really happy with that. So I had an electrician come in and I had him run a sub panel into my closet with 3 dedicated outlets in it. And I ran a SurgePure conditioner, surge protector at the junction box. And what that did was it dropped the noise floor in the electronics so low. I don't hear any noise. I don't hear any hum. And also I'm protecting the house from surges, from inner transients. I want to talk to you a little bit more about SurgePure because if you guys have not invested in something like this, and if you live in Florida, the lightning capital of the world, this is something that we should be talking about. I want to show you this system, and then we'll talk about why you need this in your home theater. So here we are on the outside of the Audioholics Smart House. Here's the power meter. the main panel. Now this is just run into one of the breakers here, the SurgePure. So the leads are really minimized. You want the leads as short as possible. That way the units react as fast as possible to any kind of surge or transients. Why did I choose SurgePure? Number one, it's made in the US. It's ETL rated. A lot of these power conditioners and surge suppressors have no UL standards, no safety or regulatory testing or anything. This is actually backed by real testing. It's ETL certified to the latest CSA C22.2 number 269, and it's ETL listed to the latest UL 1449 5th edition. So this is serious stuff here. One thing SurgePure has that many of its competitors don't is catastrophic non-degraded protection. What that means is it could take multiple hits and the MOVs are still protected. They still give you surge protection and lightning protection from your house. These things use a very large MOV. Most of the ones you see in the really expensive conditioners in your house are these little tiny dime-sized MOVs. These have 40mm MOVs. And the difference between the Mach 2 versus the Mach 3 is this has sine wave filter tracking on it. So it helps filter out any of the noise or transients in your line. And that includes surges that are developed in your house. If you have AC motors with your HVAC or your refrigerator, really important to have a device like this. I think a retail on it is around $2,600, and then you have to get a certified electrician to install it into your panel. So SurgePure has been making surge protection devices since the 70s, and their tech is used in hospitals, industrial facilities, and even Air Force bases. Yeah, that's how serious they are. That's a huge advantage because SurgePure catches surges right at the panel before the event ever hits your home wiring. That's really the secret there. So you could put power conditioners at your rack, but the fact is those surges are already through your wiring. This arrests that surge before it even happens, before it gets into your house. That's the kind of security that you really want, especially if you live in the lightning capital of the world, Florida, which is where I'm at. I think these are a really good investment to put in anyone's house, not just to protect your electronics, but to protect your refrigerator, your appliances, pretty much everything in your house. And like I said, once I installed this and I had a separate junction box going into my theater room, it made all the world of difference. I got rid of my ground loops, the noise floor lowered on my amplifiers. It's just been a great experience for me, something I definitely recommend you guys check out. So to finish off this rack, the one thing I have to talk to you about is the control system, and that's really important to get right in a theater room. You want to have any kind of automation going. I use Control 4, and I do recommend you find a very good programmer for that because it's not something you could do on your own. But Control 4 is what operates this whole system. It creates lighting events, it creates scenes. There's a lot of flexibility with Control 4. Speaking of lights, I use a system called Vitrie for my lighting panels. Beautiful stuff, a little bit challenging to install compared to some of the other lighting companies I've worked with. I really like it. It's a company based in Israel. The glass panels are beautiful. They custom make it to whatever you want. As you can see, I have the Audioholics logo embedded into the panel for my main control switch in this theater room. It just looks beautiful. All right, so last but not least is the closet here. Again, some acoustic trade-offs by doing this, but I needed the storage. I have my rack that's built into the wall. I have easy access. I could get behind it. I could change wires on it. That's really convenient because this is a complex system. I have a lot of cables coming in. I think I've got 3 miles of cable, of data cable, speaker cable through this house. Because like I said, I've got multiple home theater systems in here. I've got 3 theater systems and a bunch of 2-channel systems and distributed audio throughout the house. So there's a lot of data, a lot of cables in here. The fact that I'm able to get behind here and be able to service this equipment is really convenient. And then all of my storage here with my Blu-rays and my DVD audio discs and even some CDs. I like to have access to physical media as well, even though I have a Kaleidoscope and I like to do the streaming through Netflix and all that other stuff. I still like to have physical media present as well. All right, guys, so that's the overview of this theater system in the Audioholics Smart House. Was it perfect? No. Were there compromises? Yes. Did I do my best to come around those compromises and make this an absolutely stunning system? I believe I did. And the people that come here and listen and experience this room with me really seem to enjoy it. I hope you found this video useful. Some of the mistakes I've made in here, some of the missteps I've made, whether it was the builder's fault or just my own error. The idea here is you learn from these experiences, so when you build your next theater room, it's even that much better. I have a lot of plans in the future when I eventually move to do something even beyond this. And building this house, learning from the mistakes has been an invaluable tool and invaluable lessons to my own knowledge. And I hope to keep sharing this stuff with you guys. So if you like this video, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics. And until next time, my friends, keep listening. and about the challenges I had to overcome to make it a truly reference state-of-the-art home theater experience. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video, or did that not come out good? So one thing that this device has that most competitors don't is it has catastrophic fit. So one thing that SurgePure has in all their models is catastrophic and non-degrading. Catastrophic event protection, non-degrading. Catastrophic event, what the f, my brain is fried. Event protection, non-degrading. Catastrophic event protection, non-degrading. This door is only about 30, hold on. I think it's 30 inches. 30 inches, motherfucker. All right, guys, I'm really f***ed. I was the last person to come into the theater room and they locked the door behind me. As you can see, I'm trapped between two doors. I'm really claustrophobic. I'm sweating like grease monkeys here. Guys, please rescue me. Give me some suggestions down below. I'm fucking out. Ah!